I suspected my wife was planning a divorce, so I moved all of my assets. 2 weeks later, she filed, then backtracked when her plan backfired. It started with small things. Bryn stopped asking about my day. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, smiling at messages she wouldn't share. When I walked into rooms, conversations ended abruptly. My mother noticed it first at Sunday brunch. "She's detaching," Mom whispered, while Bryn was in the bathroom. I've seen it before. I wanted to believe Mom was wrong, but then I found the folder. Bryn had left her laptop open, and there it was, a directory labeled B New Start. Inside were screenshots of our bank statements, property deeds, retirement accounts. She documented everything we owned down to the penny. There were also saved listings for apartments downtown, the expensive kind with doormen and rooftop pools. She'd never mentioned wanting to move. The real gut punch was the consultation receipt from Morrison and Associates. I knew that firm. They were divorce attorneys, the ruthless kind that specialized in taking husbands to the cleaners. The consultation was dated 3 months back. 3 months of her lying to my face every single day. I called my college roommate Trevor that night. He'd gone through a nasty divorce 2 years prior. Lost his house, his savings, everything. "Don't wait," he said. "If she's planning, you need to act first." So I did. I opened new accounts at a different bank and quietly moved funds. I transferred stocks to my uncle's name temporarily, with a written agreement. I sold the boat we never used and deposited the cash in a safety deposit box. The house was in both our names, but everything else became unreachable. 2 weeks later, Bryn served me papers over breakfast. She didn't say a word, just slid the envelope across the table and walked out. I opened it and felt oddly calm. She was asking for half of everything, including assets she thought still existed in our joint accounts. Her lawyer had gotten sloppy, listing specific account numbers with estimated values. Those accounts now held $1,147 combined. That evening, she came home with her sister Reese. They were laughing, talking about Bryn's new apartment lease, when she checked her phone and her face went sheet white. Her lawyer had clearly just informed her about the accounts. "Where is it?" she said quietly. "Where's what?" I asked, not looking up from my dinner. "The money. Our money." I took a bite of pasta. "Oh, you mean my money? The money I earned while you were planning to rob me blind?" Her sister tried to intervene, but Bryn cut her off. She called me every name imaginable, threatened to get the courts involved, said I'd hidden marital assets. "Prove it," I said. "Show them where this money allegedly went." The next morning, her lawyer called mine. They wanted to negotiate. Bryn would drop the divorce if I returned the assets and we'd attend counseling. I almost laughed. She'd spent months plotting to destroy me financially, and now that her plan had exploded, she wanted to reconcile? I agreed to meet at a mediator's office. Bryn showed up looking exhausted, makeup unable to hide the dark circles. "I made a mistake," she started, but her lawyer kept interrupting with legal threats about concealed assets and forensic accountants. That's when I pulled out my own folder. It contained printed messages between Bryn and her personal trainer, discussing their future together once she got her settlement. There were texts about hiding my grandfather's watch at her mother's house so she could claim it in the divorce. Plans to max out credit cards before filing, sticking me with the debt. The mediator reviewed the messages in silence. Bryn's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed glass. "I think we're done here," I said, standing up. But as I reached the door, Bryn's phone rang. She answered. Then her face transformed into something I'd never seen before. Pure terror. She looked at me and whispered, "Your uncle just called my mom. He's at her house right now with the police." I smiled. "That's interesting. Wonder what they're looking for." Bryn's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped her phone. Her lawyer leaned over, trying to listen to the frantic voice on the other end. I could hear her mother screaming in the background, something about a warrant and how this was harassment. "What did you do?" Bryn hissed at me. I sat back down, crossing my legs casually. "Remember that watch you mentioned in your texts? The Patek Philippe my grandfather left me? The one worth $47,000 that you stashed at your mom's house?" I pulled out another document from my folder. "I reported it stolen 2 weeks ago, filed a police report and everything, gave them screenshots of your messages discussing where you'd hidden it." Her lawyer's face went from confused to horrified as he did the mental math. That's felony theft. Grand larceny, actually," I corrected. "In this state, anything over $25,000 is a Class 2 felony. 3 to 7 years, I believe." Bryn lunged across the table at me, but her lawyer caught her arm. Don't say anything. We need to leave. Now." He started shoving papers into his briefcase with shaking hands. The mediator just sat there, stunned into silence. "There's more," I said, my voice calm. "See, when I was moving assets around, I got curious about those credit cards you'd been using, the ones you planned to max out before filing. Turns out you'd been using them quite a bit already. $23,000 at jewelry stores, $11,000 at furniture places, all in the last 2 months. I slid receipts across the table. But here's the interesting part. None of that jewelry is at our house. None of that furniture either. So I asked myself, where did it all go? I tapped another document. Your personal trainer's new apartment. The one you helped furnish. The one where you spent Tuesday and Thursday afternoons when you told me you were at yoga. Reese, who'd been silent this whole time, looked at her sister with disgust. Bryn, what the hell? I had his apartment manager confirm the deliveries, I continued. Got statements from neighbors who saw you coming and going. Even found your car on his building's security footage, time-stamped during your supposed yoga classes. Bryn's lawyer was frantically typing on his phone. We're leaving. Don't say another word. Oh, we're not done yet, I said. Because all those purchases, they were made on cards in my name. Cards you had access to as an authorized user. Cards you used to buy gifts for your boyfriend while planning to divorce me and stick me with the debt. I looked directly at her lawyer. That's fraud. Identity theft. Credit card fraud. Should I keep going? The mediator finally found his voice. I think I think this session is over. I'll be filing a report with the court about what I've witnessed here today. Bryn's phone rang again. This time it was a different number. She answered with a shaking hand. Hello? I couldn't hear the other end, but I watched her face cycle through confusion, then panic, then pure devastation. When she hung up, she looked at me with hatred I didn't think she was capable of. That was Chad, she said quietly. Chad. The personal trainer finally had a name. The police are at his apartment too. They're seizing the furniture, the jewelry, everything. They're calling it receiving stolen property. Well, I said, standing up again. He did receive property bought with fraudulently used credit. That's his problem now, not mine. Her lawyer grabbed her arm. We're leaving right now, don't say anything else. Not to him, not to anyone. We need damage control immediately. As they rushed toward the door, I called out. Oh, Bryn, one more thing. I called your employer this morning. Told them you'd been falsifying expense reports to funnel money to your personal trainer. They're conducting an internal audit as we speak. Should be interesting what they find. She stopped dead. Save it, I interrupted. I found the reports. Business dinners that never happened. Conference hotels you never stayed in. All coincidentally on the same days and locations as Chad's work trips. Your HR department seemed very interested in the evidence. This was a lie. I hadn't called her employer, but I knew Bryn, knew how she operated. If she was stealing from me, she was probably stealing from them too. The way her face went white told me I'd guessed correctly. Her lawyer physically dragged her from the room before she could say anything else. Reese lingered for a moment, looking between me and the door her sister had just been pulled through. She wasn't always like this, Reese said quietly. Yes, she was, I replied. You just didn't want to see it. After they left, I sat alone with the mediator. He was reviewing his notes with an expression somewhere between shock and fascination. In 20 years of mediation, he said slowly, I've never seen anything quite like that. Me neither, I admitted. And I was married to her for 7 years. He set down his pen. You understand this is going to get very ugly? If even half of what you alleged is true, she's facing serious criminal charges. All of it's true. I have evidence for everything. Then why go through mediation at all? Why not just take this straight to the police? I leaned back in my chair. Because I wanted her to know. I wanted to watch her realize that every calculation she'd made, every plan she'd executed, every lie she'd told, I was 10 steps ahead the entire time. I wanted her to understand what it feels like to have your life dismantled by someone you trusted. The mediator nodded slowly. That's remarkably cold. You should have seen the text she sent Chad about me, about how stupid I was, how easy it would be to take everything, how I'd never see it coming because I was too busy working to support her lifestyle. I stood up and gathered my folders. She was right about one thing. I was working to protect myself while she was working to destroy me. My phone buzzed. A text from my uncle. Got the watch. Police have taken statements from her mother. You were right. She tried to hide 6 other items here too. Jewelry, bonds, even your father's coin collection. They're cataloging everything now. I showed the message to the mediator. He whistled low. She really went for it, didn't she? She really did. I left the building and sat in my car for a long moment. Part of me felt vindicated. The larger part felt exhausted. 7 years of marriage gone. Destroyed not by falling out of love or growing apart, but by calculated greed and betrayal. I'd spent 3 months carefully dismantling her plan, moving chess pieces she didn't know I could see, preparing for a war I never wanted to fight. My phone rang. Trevor, how'd it go? He asked. She's probably getting arrested as we speak. Holy shit, you actually did it. I had to, I said. If I hadn't moved first, I'd be the one losing everything right now. Yeah, but, Trevor paused. Are you okay? Like, really okay? Was I? I'd just systematically destroyed the woman I'd once loved, set in motion events that would likely send her to prison, exposed her affair, her theft, her fraud, all while sitting calmly in a mediator's office, delivering each revelation like I was discussing the weather. I don't know, I admitted. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. You need anything? Want to grab a drink? Rain check. I have one more stop to make. I drove to my mother's house. She was in the garden, pruning roses like it was any other Thursday afternoon. When she saw my face, she set down her shears. It's done? She asked. It's done. She pulled me into a hug, and for the first time since finding that folder on Bryn's laptop, I felt something crack inside me. Not breaking exactly, more like thawing. I'm sorry you had to go through this, Mom said. No one should have to become the person you became today. I didn't become anyone, I protested. I just protected myself. You became someone who could sit across from a person you loved and calmly destroy them. That's not nothing, sweetheart. That changes you. She was right. And I hated that she was right. I'd turned into something cold and calculating. I'd lied, manipulated, and orchestrated someone's downfall with precision that scared even me. What was I supposed to do, I asked. Let her take everything? Let her get away with it? No, Mom said firmly. You did what you had to do. But don't pretend it didn't cost you something too. Don't pretend you're the same person you were 4 months ago. We sat on her porch as the sun started to set. My phone kept buzzing with updates. Text from my lawyer. Bryn's attorney wants to meet. They're talking plea deals. Text from my uncle. Police found evidence of wire fraud too. This is bigger than we thought. Text from an unknown number that I suspected was Reese. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed her life. I wasn't happy. I was numb. 3 days later, the full scope became clear. The police investigation had uncovered a pattern of theft going back 2 years. Bryn had been systematically stealing from me, her employer, even her own parents. She'd opened credit cards in her mother's name, forged checks from her father's business account, and embezzled over $100,000 from her company. The apartment listings I'd found weren't just for after the divorce. She'd already signed a lease, already furnished it with my money, already created an entire separate life. Chad, the personal trainer, turned on her immediately, gave investigators everything in exchange for immunity. Texts, emails, bank statements. He painted a picture of Bryn as the mastermind, claiming he'd been manipulated and used. Maybe that was true. Maybe he was just saving himself. Either way, the evidence was damning. Morrison and Associates dropped her as a client. No firm wanted to touch her case. She eventually found a public defender, which told me she'd burned through whatever money she'd managed to hide. Her mother stopped taking my uncle's calls after the police expanded their investigation to include her for harboring stolen property. The divorce proceedings became a formality. With criminal charges pending, Bryn's lawyer advised her to agree to whatever I wanted to avoid, antagonizing me further. I kept the house, the cars, the retirement accounts, everything. She got nothing. In fact, she'd likely end up owing me restitution once the criminal case concluded. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. 1 month later, I was cleaning out the garage when I found a box of photos from our wedding. Young, happy versions of ourselves, completely unaware of how it would all end. In one photo, Bryn was laughing at something I'd said, her head thrown back in genuine joy. I remembered that moment. Remembered thinking I was the luckiest man alive. What happened between that photo and now? Was she always capable of this level of deception, or did something break along the way? Did I miss warning signs, or had she simply been that good at hiding her true nature? I threw the photos away, all of them. Keeping them felt like holding on to a fiction. Trevor called that evening. Hey, so I'm getting married next month. Civil ceremony, nothing fancy. You should come. Might be good for you to remember that not all marriages end in disaster. You're getting married? Since when? Since about 6 months ago when I met Amy. She's a teacher. Normal, stable, not secretly planning my financial ruin. It's refreshing, honestly. Congratulations, man. That's great. The wedding's on a Saturday. Bring a date if you want, but no pressure. Just come, okay? Get out of your head for a few hours. I promised I'd be there, though the idea of watching someone else pledge their life to another person made my stomach turn. The preliminary hearing for Bryn's criminal case was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I didn't plan to attend, but my lawyer said it would be good for me to be there, to show the judge I was taking this seriously. So I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched as Bryn was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit. She'd lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and without makeup, she looked years older. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Not hatred, something else. Regret? Resignation? I couldn't tell. The prosecutor laid out the charges: grand larceny, wire fraud, identity theft, credit card fraud, embezzlement. Each one carried a potential sentence. Added together, Bryn was looking at 15 to 20 years in prison. Her public defender argued for bail reduction, claimed she wasn't a flight risk. The prosecutor countered by revealing that police had found a second passport in Bryn's apartment, this one under an assumed name, along with $40,000 in cash and flight confirmations to the Cayman Islands, dated for 1 week after she'd planned to file for divorce. She wasn't just planning to take my money, she was planning to disappear with it. The judge denied bail reduction. As Bryn was led back out, she turned and looked at me one last time. Her mouth formed words I couldn't hear but could easily read. I'm sorry. Too late for sorry. Years too late. I left the courthouse and drove aimlessly for hours, ending up at the lake where Bryn and I used to go on weekends when we were first dating. We'd rent a boat, pack sandwiches, spend entire afternoons just floating and talking about our future, the house we'd buy, the kids we'd have, the trips we'd take. None of it was real. Or maybe it was real once and something changed. I'd never know which, and that uncertainty gnawed at me more than any of the actual betrayal. My phone buzzed. Email from my lawyer with the subject line, plea deal offered. The prosecutor was offering Bryn 7 years in prison in exchange for guilty pleas on all counts and full restitution of the stolen funds. It was a generous offer given the charges. My lawyer was asking if I wanted to weigh in, though technically it wasn't my decision. 7 years. She'd be 43 when she got out. Her life would be effectively over. Any career prospects? Gone. Her reputation? Destroyed. Her family relationships? Shattered. All because she'd gotten greedy and thought she was smarter than everyone else. I sat by the lake as the sun set, trying to feel something other than emptiness. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? Justice. Consequences. For her to understand what she'd tried to do to me. But watching it actually happen, seeing her in that courtroom, knowing she'd spend the next 7 years behind bars, she did this to herself, I said out loud to no one. Trevor's wedding was the following Saturday. He'd found a small venue near the river, intimate and unpretentious. About 30 people total, all close friends and family. Amy was exactly as he'd described. Warm, grounded, with an easy laugh and kind eyes. The kind of person who made you feel comfortable immediately. During the ceremony, as they exchanged vows, I found myself analyzing every word for hidden meanings, warning signs, potential future betrayals. When Amy promised to love Trevor in good times and bad, I wondered if she really meant it, or if it was just pretty words that would evaporate when tested. When Trevor promised to be faithful and true, I wondered how many men had made that same promise while secretly planning their exits. I was broken. The realization hit me hard. Bryn hadn't just stolen money and trust. She'd stolen my ability to believe in anything. At the reception, Trevor pulled me aside. "You okay? You seem broken," I finished. "That's the word you're looking for. That's not permanent," he said. "I was broken too after my divorce. Took time, but I got through it. You will too." "How do you do it?" I asked. "How do you trust someone again after what you went through?" Trevor glanced at Amy across the room, laughing with her bridesmaids. "I don't trust blindly anymore, but I learned to recognize the difference between reasonable caution and letting past trauma poison everything good. Amy's nothing like my ex. She's proven that 1,000 different ways. At some point, you have to decide if you're going to let one terrible person ruin all your future relationships. But how do you know? How do you really know someone won't betray you?" "You don't," he admitted. "That's the scary part. But you also can't live in a fortress forever. That's not living. That's just existing." I stayed at the reception for another hour, watching couples dance and laugh, wondering if any of them harbored the same doubts I did, or if I was uniquely damaged now. 6 weeks later, Bryn accepted the plea deal. 7 years in federal prison, full restitution, probation after release. Her sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. My lawyer asked again if I wanted to attend, maybe even give a victim impact statement. I declined. What more was there to say? But 2 days before the sentencing, I received a letter, handwritten, forwarded through my lawyer, from Bryn. I almost threw it away without reading it. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 5 pages long, single-spaced, every line crammed with tiny, desperate handwriting. She started with apologies, the kind that felt hollow and performative. She claimed she'd never meant to hurt me, that things had just spiraled out of control. She blamed her upbringing, her father's gambling addiction, her mother's materialism. She blamed the pressure of keeping up appearances, of living in a neighborhood we couldn't really afford, of feeling like she was never enough. Then she got honest, painfully honest. "I know you think I never loved you," she wrote, "but I did. That's what makes this so much worse. I loved you and I destroyed us anyway. Not because you weren't enough, but because I wasn't. I looked at our life and saw everything I thought I wanted, and somehow it still wasn't enough. I needed more, always more. More money, more excitement, more validation. I convinced myself I deserved things I hadn't earned. I built this fantasy life in my head and destroyed our real life trying to make it happen," she went on. "Meeting Chad was the worst thing that could have happened because he made the fantasy seem possible. He told me I was wasting my life with you, that I could do better, be more. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because believing him meant I wasn't the problem, our marriage was. But you weren't the problem, I was. I am. And I'll spend the next 7 years thinking about what I threw away for a fantasy that disappeared the second reality showed up." The letter continued with more apologies, more explanations, more desperate attempts to make me understand her thought process. She ended with, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that loving you was real. Destroying you was the delusion." I read the letter 3 times, each time hoping to feel something different. Anger, vindication, maybe even satisfaction. But all I felt was tired, bone deep exhausted from carrying this weight for so long. The sentencing hearing happened without me. My lawyer attended and called afterward to report. The judge had accepted the plea deal. 7 years. Bryn had cried during her statement, apologizing to everyone she'd hurt. Her mother had testified on her behalf, talking about Bryn's difficult childhood and asking for leniency. The judge had been unmoved. "One thing the judge said was interesting," my lawyer mentioned. "She told Bryn that the saddest part wasn't the crimes themselves, but that she'd had a good life and destroyed it chasing a better one she didn't need." That night, I burned Bryn's letter in my fireplace, watched the pages curl and blacken, her tiny, desperate handwriting disappearing into ash. Part of me wanted to keep it as evidence of her remorse, proof that I'd been right to protect myself. But keeping it meant holding on to her, and I needed to let go. 3 months passed. I sold the house, too many memories, and bought a smaller place across town. Started seeing a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. Learned words like gaslighting and financial abuse and narcissistic behavior patterns. Learned that what I'd experienced had a name, that I wasn't alone, that healing was possible even if it felt impossible right now. Trevor and Amy invited me to dinner regularly. Slowly, painfully, I learned to sit at their table without looking for hidden agendas. Amy's kindness started feeling less like manipulation and more like kindness. Trevor's happiness started seeming less naive and more earned. "You're getting better," Amy observed one evening after dinner. "You smiled at 3 separate points tonight. Genuine smiles, not the polite ones you've been giving us for months." "I'm trying," I said. "That's all any of us can do," she replied. A year after Bryn's sentencing, I received notification that she'd paid the first installment of her restitution, $500 from her prison commissary wages. At the rate she was going, she'd finish paying me back approximately never. But the money wasn't the point anymore. I'd recovered financially. What I was still working on recovering was my ability to trust, to believe in anything good, to imagine a future that wasn't just me alone in a fortress of my own making. "You know what's crazy?" I told my therapist during one session. "I still dream about her sometimes. Not nightmares about the betrayal. Just normal dreams where we're still together, still happy. And when I wake up, I'm not relieved it was just a dream. I'm sad." "You're mourning," she said gently. "Not just the marriage, but the person you thought you married, the future you thought you'd have. That's normal. It's been over a year. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. You'll heal when you heal." I started dating again around month 14. Nothing serious, just coffee meetings arranged through apps. Most of them went nowhere. I was too guarded, too quick to look for red flags, too ready to run at the first sign of anything that reminded me even vaguely of Bryn. Then I met Diana. She was a structural engineer, pragmatic and direct in a way I found refreshing. On our third date, I told her about Bryn. All of it. The planning, the betrayal, the systematic dismantling of her scheme, the criminal charges, everything. I figured if it was going to scare her off, better to know now. She listened without interrupting, then said, "That sounds absolutely exhausting." It was. "Are you over it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm working on it." "Fair enough," she said. "I appreciate the honesty. Most people hide their baggage until it's too late." We kept seeing each other. Diana was patient with my paranoia, my need to verify things, my difficulty with trust. She never pushed, never demanded more than I could give. When I apologized for being damaged, she said, "Everyone's damaged. You're just honest about yours." One evening, 6 months into our relationship, she said, "I need to tell you something. It's probably going to trigger you, but I'd rather be upfront." My stomach dropped. Here it comes, I thought. The revelation, the hidden truth, the other shoe dropping. "I have a job opportunity in Seattle. Really good position, significant pay increase. I haven't decided if I'm taking it yet, but I wanted you to know it's on the table. If I do take it, I'd be moving in 3 months." I waited for the rest. The part where she'd been planning this all along. The part where this was all a test or a trap. But she just looked at me, waiting for a response. "Are you asking me to move with you?" I finally managed. "No," she said. "I'm telling you about a decision I need to make that will affect our relationship. If I take the job, we'd need to decide if we want to try long distance, if you'd want to consider moving eventually, or if this is where we end things. But I'm not making any of those decisions without talking to you first." Something inside me loosened. This was what healthy communication looked like. No schemes, no hidden plans, just two people navigating life together, being honest about challenges. "I'm probably going to handle this badly," I warned. "I'm probably going to have moments where I convince myself you're leaving, because you were planning to all along, not because of a job. My brain is wired to see betrayal everywhere now." "I know," she said. "And when those moments happen, we'll talk through them, together." She didn't take the Seattle job, not because of me, but because after researching more, she decided it wasn't the right fit. But the way she'd handled it, the transparency, the inclusion in her decision-making process, showed me what partnership could look like when both people were actually partners. 2 years after Bryn's sentencing, I was doing better, not perfect. I still had moments of paranoia, still checked bank accounts obsessively, still had nightmares occasionally about discovering folders labeled New Start on laptops. But the moments came less frequently. The nightmares faded. The checking became habit rather than compulsion. I got a call from my lawyer. "Bryn's appealing her sentence. Claims her public defender was incompetent. Probably won't go anywhere, but I wanted you to know." "Okay," I said, and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, no satisfaction, just indifference. "You sound different," my lawyer observed. "More settled." "I am," I said. "I'm finally starting to understand what my mom meant." "What's that?" "That Bryn didn't just change me. She revealed who I was capable of becoming when pushed to my limits, and now I get to decide what to do with that knowledge." 3 years later, Diana and I got married. Small ceremony, just close friends and family, no elaborate plans, no stress, just two people who'd found each other after separate disasters and decided to build something real. During our vows, I promised to be honest, to communicate, to work through problems together. She promised the same. Simple promises that would have seemed obvious before Bryn. Now they felt revolutionary. At the reception, my mother pulled me aside. "You look happy," she said. "Really happy." "I am," I replied, surprised to realize it was true. "She's good for you. She sees who you are now and loves you anyway." "Who am I now?" I asked. Mom smiled. "Someone who survived. Someone who learned that being protective isn't the same as being closed off. Someone who figured out how to trust again, carefully and cautiously, but genuinely." 4 years after everything with Bryn, I got a notification. She'd been released early for good behavior, served 5 years of her 7-year sentence. I showed Diana the notification. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's weird. For so long, she was this huge presence in my life. First as my wife, then as this villain I was fighting against. Now she's just a person who did terrible things and paid for them, someone I used to know." "That sounds like healing," Diana said. She was right. The obsession had finally burned out. Bryn was just part of my history now, not an open wound I kept picking at. I'd learned what I needed to learn, protected what I needed to protect, and moved forward. I never heard from Bryn directly after her release. No apology letters, no attempts at contact. My uncle mentioned seeing her once, working at a grocery store in a neighboring town, looking older and worn down. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. Just a recognition that we'd both lost things that could never be recovered, and we were both living with those losses in our own ways. 5 years after the divorce was finalized, Diana and I found out we were having a baby. As we sat in the ultrasound room looking at the fuzzy image on the screen, I thought about all the plans Bryn and I had made for a family we'd never have, all the dreams that had turned to ash. But this was different. This was real, built on actual trust, actual communication, actual partnership. No secrets, no schemes, just two people navigating life's challenges together, one honest conversation at a time. "You're crying," Diana said, squeezing my hand. "Happy tears," I assured her. And they were. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to the future instead of just trying to survive the present. That night, lying in bed, Diana asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found that folder? If you'd never known what Bryn was planning?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "I'd probably be broke and destroyed, wondering what I did wrong, blaming myself for the marriage falling apart. Do you ever wish you could go back and do things differently?" I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I finally said. What happened was awful, but it taught me what I was capable of. It showed me the difference between being naive and being trusting. It revealed who would stand by me and who wouldn't, and eventually it led me to you. So no, I wouldn't change it. She kissed my forehead. Good answer. Besides, I added, I got my grandfather's watch back. That alone made it worth it. She laughed, and the sound filled our bedroom with warmth. This was what happiness felt like after surviving hell. Not the innocent joy of never being hurt, but the hard-earned peace of someone who'd been to the bottom and clawed their way back up. Bryn had tried to destroy me. Instead, she'd inadvertently destroyed herself and rebuilt me into someone stronger. Someone more careful, yes, but also someone more appreciative of genuine love when it appeared. Someone who would never again take trust for granted or mistake a pretty surface for a solid foundation. 7 years after everything began, I got one final notification. Bryn had completed her probation. Her debt to society was paid. We were no longer connected in any legal way. She was free to rebuild her life however she chose. I deleted the notification and went to find Diana. She was in the nursery we'd just finished painting, rocking our 6-month-old daughter. Everything okay? She asked, seeing my face. Everything's perfect, I said, and meant it. Let's go for a walk. All 3 of us. As we strolled through our neighborhood, our daughter giggling at the leaves dancing in the breeze, I realized something profound. Bryn had taken 7 years of my life, 3 planning her betrayal, 1 fighting back, and 3 more recovering from it. But those 7 years had taught me more about myself, about trust, about love and betrayal and resilience than any 7 years of smooth sailing ever could have. I wasn't grateful for what she'd done, but I was grateful for who I'd become despite it, for the life I'd built from the ashes of the one she'd tried to steal. And that, I thought, was the best revenge of all. Not her imprisonment or her downfall, but my happiness. My real, hard-earned, carefully built happiness. Diana squeezed my hand as we walked, and our daughter reached up with tiny fingers, grabbing at the sunlight filtering through the trees. This was everything Bryn had tried to destroy, everything I'd fought to protect, and everything that made the fight worthwhile. 7 years ago, I'd suspected my wife was planning a divorce and moved all my assets. Today, those assets were funding a life I actually wanted to live with a woman I actually trusted and a daughter who would grow up watching what a real partnership looked like. Bryn had played her cards thinking she held all the power, but in the end, she just taught me how to play the game better than she ever could. And more importantly, she taught me when to stop playing games altogether and start building something real.